Chaos, terror, and confusion across Ukraine tonight as the country reels from a barrage of missile strikes on at least a dozen cities. In total, Russia launched about 84 cruise missiles toward Ukraine, a dozen regions in the crosshairs. The attacks left at least 14 people dead. At least 5 of those deaths were in Kyiv alone. Moscow has targeted civilian sites throughout the war, as we know, but Russian President Vladimir Putin says these strikes were in response to the explosion of a key bridge that connects the Russian mainland to the Crimean Peninsula. The Kerch Bridge is logistically important for Moscow, but it's also seen as a symbol of the Kremlin's occupation of the southern Ukrainian peninsula. Newsy national correspondent Jason Bellini has been following the latest developments from here. Jason, thanks for being on tonight. What do we know about how this all began?
Well, hey there, Alex. What I can tell you is tonight there are tens of thousands of Ukrainians who are in darkness because these attacks hit critical infrastructure, including electricity. Many people also without water. You need electricity in Ukraine to pump the water. Now, as you mentioned, these attacks came in the morning during rush hour. You had children who just arrived at school. They needed to shelter at their school. And the attacks landed in central Ukraine. And this is very significant because really at the very beginning of the invasion, even then there weren't attacks that hit so central in areas that are near the country's parliament and causing destruction in areas where it's never been seen before. And this is after many months of there being very few attacks. It's been around 4 months since there was an attack on Kyiv. So this was significant. It wasn't just Kyiv. It was all over the country. But tonight, President Zelensky is sending another message of defiance.
Horror and chaos in Ukraine's capital as Russia unleashes a string of missile attacks targeting bridges, power plants, and other civilian infrastructure. The strikes on Kyiv were the first in 4 months. Explosions rocked at least a dozen cities, including Lviv in the west and Kharkiv in the northeast. The blast shook cities that in recent months enjoyed relative normalcy, with most of the fighting concentrated in the south and the east.
There was an explosion. Everything was shaking. We don't know. We were here in this place. If not, I don't know what could have happened to us. We were here between the walls. Here is the chair. And everything was flying, and I was screaming.
The footage from the ground is gut-wrenching. One young woman saying, "My hands are shaking. I just saw a rocket go by." And then this. Russian President Vladimir Putin said during a televised address the strikes were conducted in retaliation. Revenge for the Ukrainian attack on a bridge to Crimea and other attacks in Russia that Putin described as terrorist actions. Along with Putin's accusations, a threat.
If the attempts to carry out terrorist attacks on our territory continue, Russia's responses will be tough and proportionate to the level of threats posed to the Russian Federation. No one should have any doubts about this.
But amid the violence and terror, a rallying cry from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky recorded outside the presidential office in Kyiv, not far from where the blasts rang out just hours before.
They seek panic and chaos. They want to destroy our energy system. They are hopeless. They deliberately chose such a time, such goals, in order to cause as much harm as possible. But we are Ukrainians, helping each other. We believe in ourselves. We restore everything that was destroyed. Now there may be temporary interruptions in electricity, but there will never be interruptions with certainty, the certainty of victory.
A sentiment echoed by the Ukrainian people, even as they shelter in place underground in the subway. The national anthem reverberating off the dark walls, a promise to keep the faith and keep fighting.
Russia launched its missiles from air, land, and sea. We're talking about strikes that are a great distance away from the front lines of this war, where most of the attacks had been concentrated until now. And again, we're seeing critical infrastructure that's come under attack, and it's going to take some time for Ukraine to replace that, but they're going to be working on restoring electricity even as they're bracing for more attacks. And I can tell you that there were 83 missiles, according to Ukrainian officials, 83 missiles that were launched by Russia. They were able to shoot down 43 of them, and that's just not an acceptable ratio, and they want to get that down to zero, of course, and it just highlights the issues they have with having inadequate air defense systems, and that's the topic on which President Zelensky spoke with President Biden today. President Biden saying that they're hurrying up getting some advanced air defense systems to the country, Alex.
Just terrifying for so many people. Newsy national correspondent Jason Bellini, appreciate it.